Be me, Jace, 28. Work in IT for a decent company. Not saving the world, but the pay is stable and the work is interesting enough. Live in my own apartment, nothing fancy, but it's mine. For the last 4 years, I've had a girlfriend, Aliana. When we first met, she was amazing, funny, driven, had this fire in her eyes. She was working some dead-end retail job to pay the bills while trying to get a foothold in social media marketing. I believed in her completely. We felt like a team, like it was us against the world. She'd come over after a long shift, completely exhausted, and I'd have dinner ready. We'd talk for hours about her dreams, her plans to build a personal brand, to work for a company that mattered. I was her biggest cheerleader. A couple of times she found these online SMM certification courses that were pretty expensive. She was hesitant, didn't think she could afford them. I didn't even blink, took care of it, told her to consider it an investment in our future. She was so grateful back then. Cried and said no one had ever supported her like that. For about a year, while she was building her portfolio and applying for jobs, things were tight for her. I covered her share of the rent more times than I can count. Never kept a tally, never held it over her head. That's just what you do when you're a team. My friends were a bit skeptical. They were good guys, the kind of friends you've had since you were a kid. They thought she was a bit too focused on appearances, on what other people thought. I told them they were wrong, that they just didn't see the ambitious, brilliant woman I saw. I defended her, even argued with one of my best friends about it. Eventually, all her hard work paid off. She landed a job at a trendy, up-and-coming startup. One of those companies with a slick website, a lot of pastel colors, and a mission to empower people through sustainable, ethically sourced whatever. I was so proud of her. I took her out to the nicest restaurant I could afford to celebrate. That night, she seemed like the woman I fell in love with, but it was the beginning of the end. I just didn't know it yet. Her new work environment was intense. It was less of a company and more of a lifestyle brand. Everyone there was extremely online, obsessed with personal branding, networking, and climbing the social ladder. Her new work friends, especially her female managers, were these hyper-ambitious girl boss types. Their conversations, which she started recounting to me, were all about leveling up, optimizing your life, and cutting out negative energy. At first, I just thought it was corporate jargon. Then, that jargon started leaking into our life. It started with little things. She'd look at my setup for playing video games with my friends and call it my decompression pod. She suggested I reevaluate my personal brand when I wore an old band t-shirt to the grocery store. I laughed it off, but it felt weird, condescending. Then came the criticism of my job. It wasn't direct at first, just little questions. Have you thought about moving into a management track? Don't you ever feel like you're stagnating here? My boss, she's only 30, and she's already a VP. It's so inspiring. I'd tell her I was happy. I liked my work. I was good at it. And I had a great work-life balance. That phrase, work-life balance, seemed to really annoy her. She said it was a mindset for people who have given up on achieving anything great. The company she worked for had a lot of after-work events. Mixers, networking nights, gallery openings. She started insisting I come along. It was painful. I'm a quiet guy. I'm not great at small talk with strangers, especially when they're all trying to outcool each other. I'd stand there awkwardly, holding a drink, while Aliana flitted around the room, laughing and making connections. One night, I was talking to one of her colleagues about a movie I'd recently seen. It was just a normal conversation. Aliana came over, put a hand on my arm, and smoothly changed the subject to a recent industry conference she attended. She gave me a look. It wasn't angry, it was worse. It was embarrassed. Like I was a child who had just said something inappropriate at the dinner table. The car ride home was silent. I finally asked her what that was all about. She sighed, this deep theatrical sigh. She explained that I didn't understand how these things worked, that my conversation was low value, and that I should be talking about things that build social capital. I was just talking about a movie. My friends were next on the chopping block. We had them over for a BBQ, something we used to do all the time. My friends are normal guys. They work in trades, in sales, in government jobs. They talk about sports, cars, and complain about their bosses. Aliana was polite to them, but distant. She spent most of the time on her phone, answering urgent work emails. After they left, the critique began. They weren't ambitious enough. They were stuck in a traditional mindset. She asked me if I ever felt like my friends were holding me back from my full potential. I told her my friends were good, loyal people who had been there for me through everything. She just shook her head and said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." It was like she was reciting a line from some motivational influencer's playbook. Our arguments became more frequent. They were always about me not being enough, not ambitious enough, not sophisticated enough, not wealthy enough. She started talking a lot about partnership, how a modern relationship is a strategic alliance between two high-value individuals, pushing each other to greater heights. I asked her if love and affection still factored into her equation. She said that emotional support is the baseline, but a true power couple builds an empire. I felt like I was dating a CEO, not a girlfriend. The physical affection started to dwindle. She was always too tired, too stressed, too busy planning her next career move. Compliments disappeared, replaced by constructive feedback. She told me I needed a new wardrobe. My clothes were uninspired. She told me I should get a different haircut, something more assertive. She even critiqued the way I talked, saying I used too much hesitant language. Every part of my personality, everything she once claimed to love, was now a flaw that needed to be fixed, a bug that needed to be patched. I started to feel like a project, her fixer-upper boyfriend. The worst part was the feeling of being constantly tested. Every conversation was a job interview. I was failing. She'd ask me what I was reading, and if it wasn't some business biography or self-help book, she'd look disappointed. She'd ask about my day at work, and if I didn't have some major victory or corporate battle to report, she'd lose interest. I started to dread coming home. My own apartment, the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, felt like a performance review I could never pass. I tried to talk to her about it. I sat her down one evening and poured my heart out. I told her I missed the old us, the team, the couple that supported each other instead of judging. I told her I felt like I was losing her, that she was becoming someone I didn't recognize. She listened patiently, with a practiced therapeutic nod. When I was done, she told me that my feelings were valid, but that I was misinterpreting her intentions. She wasn't criticizing me. She was challenging me. She wasn't pulling away. She was creating space for my growth. She said my discomfort was just growing pains, and that I was exhibiting classic male resistance to a powerful woman's success. She had an answer for everything. A perfectly packaged corporate feminist buzz phrase to deflect any real emotional responsibility. It was a conversation with a brick wall, a very articulate, well-branded brick wall. I felt completely alone in a two-person relationship. The money issue came up again, but in a totally different way. I never once mentioned the thousands of dollars I'd spent on her courses or the months I covered her rent. But she started making comments about our finances. She wanted to go on a lavish vacation to some trendy spot she saw on social media. I suggested a more modest local trip, since we were trying to save up. She scoffed, said she didn't want a mediocre experience. Then she said the line that made my blood run cold. "If you had a better job, we wouldn't have to worry about things like this." After everything I had done, after all the support I had given her when she had nothing, that was the moment I knew, deep down, that it was over. The respect was gone, completely. But I was still a coward. I couldn't bring myself to end it. I kept hoping the old Aliana would come back. She ended up making the decision for me. It was a few weeks later. I don't remember the exact day. She had been at a work awards ceremony. She came home late, well after midnight. I was in bed pretending to be asleep. I just didn't have the energy for another performance review. She turned on the light. "Jace, wake up. We need to talk." I sat up. She was standing at the foot of the bed, still in her fancy dress. She wasn't drunk. She was disturbingly sober. Her eyes were clear and cold. She didn't sit down. She stood there, like a manager about to fire an underperforming employee. She started with, "This isn't easy for me to say." She then launched into a perfectly rehearsed speech. It was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak applied to a human heart. She talked about her personal growth trajectory. She talked about the divergence of our life paths. She said she needed a partner who operates on the same frequency. It was all nonsense, but the message was crystal clear. I just sat there, numb, listening to her. I asked her if there was someone else. She had the audacity to look offended. This isn't about someone else. This is about me. It's about honoring my own potential and not letting myself be held back by attachments that no longer serve my higher purpose. It was the most selfish, self-important thing I had ever heard. I finally found my voice. I asked her, after 4 years, after everything, the courses, the rent, all the support, does any of that mean anything to you? I wasn't yelling. I was just empty. She looked at me, and for the first time, her corporate mask slipped. I saw a flash of genuine, ice-cold contempt. Then she smiled, a small, dismissive smile. "Jace, you have to think of it like an investment," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "You invested in me. I'm grateful for the seed money, but my stock is soaring, and frankly, you can't afford me anymore. Sometimes early investors just get cashed out. Not all investments pan out the way you hope." She called my love, my support, my money, seed money. She called our relationship a failed investment. I had no words, nothing. My brain just shut down. I couldn't process the sheer cruelty of it. She told me she had already packed a bag and would be staying with a friend. She'd arranged to get the rest of her things later in the week. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back at me. "I really do hope you find someone on your level someday, Jace. Goodbye." And then she was gone. I just sat there on the edge of the bed, in the quiet apartment that suddenly felt huge and empty. I sat there for hours. I watched the sun come up. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt like nothing. Like I had been completely and utterly erased. She hadn't just broken up with me. She had declared me worthless, a failed investment. And the worst part was, in that moment, I believed her. The first few weeks were a blur of nothing. I went to work, came home, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Every corner reminded me of her. The spot on the couch where she used to work on her laptop. The hook where she hung her keys. The half-empty bottle of her favorite shampoo in the shower. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I lost weight. Sleep was a lottery. Sometimes I'd pass out from exhaustion. Other times I'd lie awake all night, replaying her final words in my head. Not all investments pan out. That line was a knife twisting in my gut. My friends tried to help. They'd call, text, invite me out. I ignored most of them. I was too ashamed, too broken. What could I even say? My girlfriend left me because I wasn't a good enough stock option for her life's portfolio. It sounded insane. Finally, one of my best friends, the one I'd argued with about her, just showed up at my door. He didn't wait for me to answer. He just used the spare key I'd given him years ago. I was on the couch, in the same clothes I'd worn the day before, surrounded by takeout containers. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't lecture me. He just looked at the mess, looked at me, and said, "All right, man, let's get you cleaned up." He didn't leave. He stayed the whole weekend. He helped me pack up all of Aliana's remaining things into boxes and stack them in the spare room. He dragged me out of the apartment for a walk, just to get some sun. We didn't talk much about her. We just existed. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. That was the turning point. It was slow, painfully slow. My friends formed a sort of rotating schedule. They made sure I wasn't alone every night. One would drag me to the gym. Another would come over with pizza and a console to play games. They never pushed me to talk about it, but they created a space where I knew I could if I wanted to. The gym was a huge help. At first I was weak. I could barely lift anything, but I channeled all the anger, all the humiliation, into the weights. Every rep was a push against her voice in my head, telling me I was mediocre. I started going on my own, early in the mornings before work. It became a ritual. The physical pain was a welcome distraction from the emotional kind. And as I started to see changes in the mirror, my confidence, which had been completely shattered, began to slowly piece itself back together. At work, I threw myself into a new project. It was a complex system migration that nobody else on my team wanted. It was tedious, difficult, and required a lot of late nights. It was perfect. For hours at a time, I could just focus on code, on logic, on solving problems that had clear, definable solutions. It was the opposite of my relationship with Aliana. There was no subtext, no mind games, just a problem and a solution. A few months into the project, I solved a major issue that had been plaguing the company for ages. My boss was thrilled. the higher-ups noticed. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about proving to myself that I was capable, that I wasn't the stagnant, unambitious failure Aliana had painted me as. Life started to find a new rhythm. I was working hard, working out, and spending quality time with friends who actually cared about me. I was starting to feel like myself again, or rather, a better version of myself. One weekend, my friends suggested we try something new. There was an indoor rock climbing gym that had opened up nearby. I was hesitant at first, but they convinced me to go. The moment I got on that wall, something clicked. It was like the project at work, but physical, a puzzle for my body. It required complete focus. You couldn't be thinking about your ex-girlfriend or your job or anything else. You had to be present, focused only on the next handhold, the next foothold. I was terrible at it, but I loved it. I started going a couple of times a week. It became my new obsession. Meanwhile, I'd occasionally hear things about Aliana through the grapevine. Social media made it unavoidable. Her profile was a curated masterpiece of success. There were pictures of her with a new guy. He looked exactly like the type she'd described wanting. Sharp suit, expensive watch, smug smile, a finance bro. There were photos from fancy restaurants, rooftop bars, and weekend trips to exclusive resorts. Her captions were full of nauseating hashtags about living your best life and building an empire. Each post felt like a targeted missile designed to prove how right she was to leave me. It stung, I won't lie, but the sting was getting duller. I was building my own life, a life that didn't need external validation or Instagram filters. I was happy for the first time in a very long time, genuinely happy. It was on a regular evening at the climbing gym. I was trying to solve a particularly difficult bouldering problem, falling over and over again. I was frustrated, about to give up. A woman's voice from behind me said, "You're thinking too much? Try leading with your left foot." I turned around. She was leaning against the wall, smiling. This was Ella. She had this warm, genuine smile that made you feel like you'd known her for years. I took her advice, tried the route again, and to my surprise, I made it to the top. I climbed down, grinning like an idiot. I went over to thank her. We started talking. The conversation was effortless. We talked about climbing, about our jobs, about stupid movies we liked. She told me she owned a small bakery nearby. There was no pretense, no agenda. She wasn't interviewing me for the position of high-value partner. She was just talking. I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. We ended up talking for over an hour, until the gym was about to close. As we were leaving, I took a chance and asked if I could buy her a coffee sometime, to thank her for the climbing tip. She smiled that incredible smile again and said she'd like that. Our first date was just coffee. It lasted for 3 hours. I learned that she'd built her bakery from the ground up. She worked incredibly hard, waking up before dawn every day, but she loved it. Her passion for it was infectious. She asked me about my job. I told her about the IT world, expecting her eyes to glaze over. But she was genuinely interested. She asked smart questions. She was impressed by the complexity of it. She didn't see my job as a status symbol. She saw it as a skill, something I was good at and worked hard for. It was a completely new experience. I told her vaguely that I'd recently gotten out of a long, difficult relationship. I didn't go into details. I just said it ended badly and that I was still finding my feet. She didn't press. She just nodded and said, "I'm sorry you went through that. It takes time to heal." That was it. Empathy. Simple, honest empathy. A few days later, I was back at the climbing gym. Ella was there. She saw me and waved me over. She handed me a small paper bag. "I brought you something," she said. Inside was a pastry. It was still warm. "A little fuel for your climb," she explained. It was such a small gesture, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. In 4 years with Aliana, a woman I had financially supported and emotionally carried, she had never once done something like that. Something small, thoughtful, and selfless, just to make my day a little better. I almost choked up right there in the middle of the gym. That was the moment I knew. This was different. Our relationship grew naturally from there. We spent our weekends hiking and climbing, not at pretentious networking events. We cooked dinner together at my apartment, talking and laughing, instead of going to overpriced restaurants to be seen. She respected my quiet nature. She didn't try to change me or mold me into something I wasn't. She loved my simple friends, and they loved her. They saw how happy she made me. She celebrated my promotion at work with a homemade cake, not with a lecture on how I should already be aiming for the next level. She didn't care about my job title or my salary. She cared about me, my character, my kindness, my loyalty. She appreciated me for who I was, not for who she thought I could become. It was a revelation. This is what a real partnership felt like. It wasn't a strategic alliance. It was a safe harbor. Around this time, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that things weren't going so well for Aliana. The finance bro had unceremoniously dumped her. Apparently, he'd found a newer, shinier accessory. He'd done it in public, at one of those rooftop bars she loved so much. Just told her he was bored and walked away, leaving her with the bill. Karma, I guess. I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel anything at all. Her life, her drama, it felt like it had happened to someone else, a long time ago. My focus was on my life with Ella. We were falling in love. It was real, it was steady, and it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. A year or so after we met, her bakery's main oven broke down. It was a catastrophic failure. A replacement would cost a fortune, money she didn't have readily available. She was on the verge of losing her business, the thing she had poured her life into. She was devastated, trying to be strong, but I could see the panic in her eyes. I had been saving money aggressively ever since my promotion. I had a significant nest egg built up. I went to the bank, withdrew the full amount needed for a new top-of-the-line industrial oven, and transferred it to her account. When she saw it, she broke down in tears. She tried to refuse, saying she couldn't possibly accept it. I looked at her and said, "This is what a team does. We're a team. Consider it an investment in us." I used the same word she had used to crush me, but this time, it was filled with love, not contempt. It was about building something together, not cashing out. She just held me and cried. We were solid, unbreakable. A few months after that, we took a trip. We planned to climb a mountain we had both been dreaming of conquering. It was a challenging multi-day hike. When we reached the summit, the view was breathtaking. The world was spread out below us. We were alone, just the two of us. I knew, in that moment, that I couldn't imagine my life without her. I got down on one knee on a rocky peak thousands of feet in the air, and I asked Ella to be my wife. She said yes, of course. There were tears, but they were the good kind. We just held each other up there on top of the world, feeling like we were the only two people alive. The engagement wasn't some big social media announcement. We told our families and our closest friends, the people who mattered. Ella didn't want a huge flashy diamond. She wanted a simple, elegant ring that she could wear every day, even when her hands were covered in flour. The wedding planning was the opposite of what I imagined a wedding would be like. It was fun. No stress, no drama. We made all the decisions together. We decided on a small outdoor ceremony in a beautiful park, followed by a reception at a local brewery that our friends loved. We wanted a party, not a performance. My friends, my best men, were so genuinely happy for me. One of them pulled me aside during the planning and told me, with a tear in his eye, that he hadn't seen me this happy since we were kids. He said Ella was the best thing that ever happened to me, and he was right. We got married on a perfect autumn day. Seeing Ella walk towards me down the aisle, it's a feeling I can't even describe. She looked so beautiful, but more than that, she looked so full of joy. When she looked at me, I saw love, respect, and a lifetime of partnership in her eyes. There was no calculation, no assessment of my value, just pure, unconditional love. The reception was amazing, just a big, loud, happy party with all our favorite people. Ella, in her wedding dress, insisted on having a food truck from her favorite local taco spot instead of some stuffy caterer. That was just who she was, real, unpretentious, and always thinking about how to make things more fun. We spent the next couple of years building our life. My career continued to advance. The confidence I'd found translated into my work. I was leading projects, mentoring junior developers. I was respected. Ella's bakery was thriving. The new oven had allowed her to expand her menu and take on bigger orders. She even hired a couple of employees. With our combined incomes and my savings, we were able to buy a house. It wasn't a sterile, minimalist mansion like the ones Oleana used to drool over on Pinterest. It was a modest house on the outskirts of the city with a big backyard. It needed some work, but we didn't mind. It was our project. We spent our weekends painting walls, planting a garden for Ella's herbs and berries, and building a small climbing wall in the garage. We adopted a goofy rescue dog from the local shelter. Life was good. It was quiet, it was stable, and it was filled with a deep, profound sense of peace and happiness. I hadn't thought about Aliana in a long, long time. She was a ghost from a different lifetime. Then, one night, it all came crashing back. It was a Friday. Ella and I were on the couch, watching a movie with the dog curled up between us. It was a perfectly normal, happy evening. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an old college acquaintance, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The message just said, "Whoa, man, didn't realize this was you." Congrats! Attached was a link to a post from one of my friends. My friend had posted a small album of photos from our wedding, just a few shots of the ceremony and the reception. He'd tagged me in it. I had mostly stayed off social media, so I hadn't seen it. The pictures were great. They captured the joy of the day perfectly. There was one photo in particular, a candid shot of me looking at Ella during our first dance. The look on my face, it was pure adoration. I smiled, showed the post to Ella, and we reminisced about the day for a bit. I thought nothing more of it. I didn't know that this post had somehow, through the twisted logic of social media algorithms, made its way onto Aliana's feed. What happened next, I only found out later, pieced together from a few sources. Aliana's life, after the finance bro, had been a slow, steady decline. Her trendy startup had eventually gone bust, a victim of its own hype. She was laid off. She discovered that her high-value skills weren't as in demand as she thought. She bounced between a series of short-term contracts and less glamorous marketing jobs. She was now in her early 30s. The dating market she had been so confident she would dominate was not kind to her. The top-tier men she pursued were either not interested in settling down or were looking for younger women. The normal, decent guys she now considered were wary of her obvious social climbing and entitled attitude. She was alone, living in a small apartment she could barely afford, watching all her girl boss friends get married and have kids, while she was still chasing the high-status life that seemed further away than ever. She was bitter, lonely, and stuck. So, on that Friday night, while I was happy and content on my couch with my wife, she was doom-scrolling through her phone, drowning her sorrows. And then she saw it. The wedding album. She saw my name. She saw my face. She saw me looking happier and more successful than she could have ever imagined. She saw my beautiful wife, a woman who radiated warmth and genuine success, not the brittle, curated kind she chased. She clicked on my friend's profile, then found my profile, which I rarely used. She saw pictures of the house, the dog, the trips Ella and I took. She saw a life, a real, tangible, happy life. The life she could have had. The life she threw away because she thought she deserved better. It was a public record of everything she had misjudged, everything she had lost. It wasn't just that I had moved on. It was that I had built a better life, a life of true wealth, without her. My success was the ultimate invalidation of her entire worldview. The safe, mediocre guy had won, not by playing her game, but by refusing to play it at all. All her talk of value, ambition, and leveling up was shown to be hollow. She had cashed out her investment right before it matured into something priceless. The realization didn't come as a slow dawn. It hit her like a freight train. All the years of condescension, the smug superiority, the cruel, dismissive words she had used to break me. It all came rushing back, but this time it was directed at her. She had traded a diamond for a handful of shiny rocks, and now the rocks had turned to dust in her hands. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. I saw the pictures. "You look happy. I'm glad." I knew instantly who it was. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I didn't even feel satisfaction. I just felt distant. I showed the message to Ella. She read it, looked up at me, and just gently took the phone from my hand. She blocked the number and deleted the message. "You don't need that in your life," she said simply. And she was right. I never heard from Aliana again. Her destruction wasn't a big dramatic movie scene. It was a quiet, lonely implosion in a small apartment on a Friday night. It was the silent, crushing weight of realizing you had everything you could ever want, and you were the one who threw it all away. My life isn't a revenge story. I didn't build my happiness to spite her. I built it because I found someone who deserved my love, my loyalty, and my investment. I found a partner who understood that a relationship isn't about what you can get, but what you can build together. And that's a kind of wealth Aliana will never understand.